does conflict look like? But I want, 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 right? It is an equal reaction. People react equally and it scales up equally. In a bullying situation, what you will notice is the target gets more and more and more emotional while the bully gets more and more and more calm because they're getting their way. And so they are having a really good time and they are relishing and gaining lots of pleasure out of the freak out of the target. But one of the other things in that dynamic is we have a strong tendency to, most children who get targeted first by adults. And that happens in subtle ways. So in this case, this girl's in your Girl Scout troop, and she never gets her permission slip back. Like any piece of paper you give to this child, you might as well put it in the shredder, because nothing will ever come of it again. And so last week, you know, it's cookie time, you really need that permission slip back, it's really important. So you handed the permission slip to everyone else, but to this girl, you took it and you pinned it to her shirt to make sure that it would get home. Totally reasonable, right? Completely targeted that child. Said it was okay to treat her differently, said it was okay to put what amounts to the scarlet letter on her shirt that says, I am a disorganized child that drives my leader crazy. And that's why when the girl's talking about the 4-color pen, she says she probably lost it. You know she has a tendency to lose things. She's drawing on the fact that you don't like this child and you have expressed it physically on that child's body, your dislike of that child. That's what bullying looks like. Yeah?
You know, I think also what we do is we try to calm down the kid that's like going ballistic by saying, oh, honey, I'm sure that, you know, Susie didn't mean to.
Right.
And so immediately you know, you're upholding something else that's, you know, for the bully.
Right, you explain away the bully's behavior, and adults do that all the time. But the backstory of this is, before Christmas, we were best friends. And I lent her my 4-color pen because we were best friends, and she really, really liked it. And then in January, when we came back from Christmas break, she decided she hated me for some reason. I have no idea why. And she used my 4-color pen to write a note that said, everybody who hates Lisa, please sign here, on the bathroom wall, and she put it up, and all of the girls in class used my 4-color pen to sign their names to say they hated me. That's why I'm so freaked out about my 4-color pen, and all I want is at least for my thing that I love to not be used against me. And maybe for an opportunity to share that story so that it doesn't happen again, because now I have no friends, and that sucks. Chime in.
What does that mean, Lisa?
You'll see.
Oh. Other than chocolate that we don't need. I don't need. I'm on my way.
Kyle, could you give me a pencil, please?
Yeah. Here.
Okay, so you look for those unequal reactions because if you're seeing that, you have a really strong sense that you are seeing bullying in action. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the definition of bullying. We have 2 in the book. One is for the little girls, and we kind of talked about it a little bit last night, that bullying at essence is being happy because another person is sad. So one person is laughing because another person is sad. One person is giggling hysterically because another person is crying. Okay? That's what bullying looks like, getting pleasure out of someone else's pain. Bullying is also on purpose, it is mean, and it is never okay. So that's the essence of bullying. For you as adults, Barbara Colaroso, who is kind of the guru that we use for the Power Up curriculum, we have a copy of her book over here. This is not a check-outable copy because this is my personal copy that she gave me herself, and I'm keeping at least one because I never seem to have one when I need one. So we have like 7 of these running around the state, so these are available if you want them. Barbara Colaroso defines bullying as the conscious, willful, deliberate activity intended to harm. And you will notice, conscious, willful, deliberate activity intended to harm, what does it mean? They do it on purpose. So when kids say, I didn't mean to hurt her feelings, they are lying. They meant to hurt her feelings. The entire reason why they did what they did was to hurt her feelings because they get pleasure out of her pain. So their goal was to cause her pain, which would bring them pleasure and or power. Okay? That's what bullying is. There's a lot of different definitions out there. Some of them have repeated and over time. The one in the Colorado State Legislature right now that's going in front of the legislature for potential passage does not have that, which is wonderful. Because schools frequently use that as a way to not pursue issues with kids. For instance, there was a little girl who was African American. She was a second grader. Walking home from school, a bunch of kids came over and called her a nappy-headed little girl. She went home and told her mom this, which, you know, a lot of people consider calling someone a nappy-haired little girl to be a racial insult, or at least calling attention to a racial difference in a really icky and intentionally cruel and mean way. And so the mother came in and she told the principal, and the principal said, yes, but here's our definition of bullying. It says repeated and over time, and this has not happened before, so we can't do anything about it. The next day, the girl was walking home, and they called her the N-word. She went home, she told her mother. Her mother comes into the principal, and she says, they called her the N-word. Clearly, this is racial bullying, and it's happened 2 times this week, repeated and over time. And he says, no. First they said nappy, then they said N-word. Those are 2 different words. That's not repeated and over time. They have to say the same thing within a space of a given time, and, you know, it has to be repeated directly. So if they call her nappy-haired again, then you've got a case for the N-word again, but probably not tomorrow. It needs to happen like next week or the week after. No. When a freshman girl on the basketball team gets hazed by shoving her head in a toilet, that is bullying. It only has to happen once for it to be a horrific thing to happen to that child. The repeated and over time doesn't make any sense. So, they do, in the current definition in the legislature, it does mention can be repeated. So we can get into the concept that part of the issue of bullying is often that it's day after day after day, year after year after year. But really it only has to happen once for it to be horrible, awful, icky, and enough to really harm a child. So, any questions on that quick definition?
Yeah. Because then who determines how icky, horrible, traumatic is it? I mean, is that going to be subjective?
That is a really, really good question. And that's one of the key questions everyone has is, but what if the kid said something and they knew it was kind of a mean thing to say, but the other child just seems to freak out? And it seems like, you know, one kid's really having to toe the line for a kid who's freaking out and getting overly emotional. Here's what I would say. You think hunting's a sport? Ask the deer. The kid who is the target gets to decide how upset they are. And a kid who gets targeted, I mean, the reality is, I'll tell you a terrible personal incident. So I'm in a staff meeting. We're actually doing the good, the bad, and the ugly with our staff. And a couple of the staff members keep teasing me during the training, and it's working really well, and we have this nice banter going. And then another staff member sort of starts to tease me and nudge me, and I look at her and I'm like, bite me. And I didn't think anything of it, because my generation, my friends, my people, that's a throwaway line that doesn't mean anything. It was really again, teasing, sign of intimacy. I was bringing her into the club. She came up to me afterwards and said, I can't believe in a presentation on bullying, you would bully me in front of everybody like that. That was a horrible thing to have done. And I immediately went, you are absolutely right. I misjudged our level of intimacy and the situation, and I am so sorry, and I fell all over myself, and it took me a good 2 months to repair that relationship. But the reality was, whether I meant to or not, because in that situation, I don't think it really was bullying, because my intent was not in any way, shape, or form to harm her. But I can say, honestly, my intent was to shut her down, because I needed to get on with the activity, and everybody was bantering, and I'm like, that's neat, but we need to move on now. Okay, let's go. So my intent was to stop the conversation and move on, but I was not intending to be cruel to her. However, that did not matter at that moment. You know, what I tell kids is, you have a problem. This girl is hurt. You have a problem because this girl is hurt, and whether or not you think you were at fault, she's hurt, so you have a problem and it's affecting our culture. How are you going to fix it? But I didn't mean to, but she's overreacting. Okay, but you have a problem. She's hurt. How are you going to fix it? And maybe part of the fix needs to be at some point that staff member coming back to me, which eventually did happen, because when I apologized and I used all of my good tools, I'm so sorry that I said that not only to you, but in front of other people. It was wrong because it humiliated you in front of other people, and it doesn't matter that that wasn't my intent. That's what it did. You know, and it was wrong because it was wrong of me to call you out publicly in that kind of way when we don't have that relationship. And our relationship is really, really important to me. I will never do that again, but what can I do to make it up to you? And she said, there is nothing you can ever do to make it up to me. Our relationship is irreparably broken, and that's it, we're done. But 2 months later, she came in and said, hey Lisa, how's it going? How's Xander? And I knew we were okay again because of the overtures that I'd been doing for 2 months, and because we went to a conflict resolution seminar where they said, in order to resolve conflict, what you should say is, I'm sorry that I blah, blah, blah. It was wrong because blah, blah, blah. You know, and so it really was like we got there eventually, but it was my responsibility as a person who hurt her, intentionally or not, to fix it. Now you do run into situations where you do have a girl who draws attention to herself and sometimes even bullies and gains power by constantly playing the victim. And then you have to have that moment, which I needed. I needed some moment because the other thing the staff member said was that I was being condescending when I used I'm sorry that I used all my tools like a good girl, and she's like, you're being so condescending. And I'm like, no, I'm not, I'm trying to do this right, you know, and this is what I know to be right. But she saw that kind of professional distance that I had in that way. I think she needed me to like cry with her or get upset, be as emotional as she was, and I wasn't emotional about it. I was more analytical because I am. But the important thing I needed was for us to get to some point where she acknowledged that I wasn't being condescending, that I was actually handling it exactly right. And we got there. You know, she didn't say it, but I didn't need her to say it, so we got there eventually. And so every situation is different, but it really is in the eye of the beholder. You know, perception is reality, and if you perceive that you have been slighted, hurt, harmed, that someone has been cruel to you, it doesn't matter if you meant to be cruel to the other person, you're just going to have to deal with it.
But I guess I'm a little confused because if you take what you just said in context and like put it with 11, 12-year-old girls,
right.
If they're in crowd, can sit there and banter each other and sit there and say words and da-da-da-da, but if the girl from the outside does it, then she's called the bully. I think that's being a little two-faced, because I have a daughter that with her friends, they can say whatever they want and everything's cool, but this person over here can't say this, she gets her feelings hurt. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, you can't, I mean, I think that's a little condescending. I mean, you can't say that, you know, okay, I'll give you for instance. I mean, there are certain people of color that if they call each other the N-word, it's okay. Yep. But, I mean, I know at college, my son is 18, he goes to University of Colorado. Between them, they can do it, but if a white person does it, it's not okay. Well, that's just a little backwards to me.
Well, and there's in-grouping and out-grouping, and that's a whole other conversation. Kaya?
Well, to me, it's just power dynamics. Who has the power in the situation? So, like, you look at domestic violence, or you look at undoing racism, and it's this layer of power. That somebody has power, and somebody doesn't, and so when you're misusing that privilege to hurt others, that's the issue. I don't know if I'm explaining that, but...
But do you really think 11-year-olds understand that concept?
I think they do. I think, yeah, like when an 11-year-old has a cell phone and no one else does, is she in a place of power over this other girl? Like, I think 6-year-olds know who has money and who doesn't, and there's a very big difference, and they pick on each other based on it.
Absolutely, and I think we'll get into that, and we'll touch on that when we get into the 3 types of bullying, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth specifically, okay? Yeah?
You mentioned about the bullying playing victim.
Huh?
So, is that, what happens in that situation? I mean, I understand the dynamics of it, you know, it's like, well, I'm the bully, and the target, and she just, you know, said something to me.
Right, right. And sometimes you have to come back and be able to identify whether this is a conflict. So my son and his best friend, Xander, used to pick at Max and pick at Max and pick at Max and pick at Max and pick at Max, like psychologically, and then Max would haul off and punch him in the head. and then Max would get in trouble. And that wasn't a bullying situation on either side. It was a conflict that my son was playing out psychologically and Max was playing out physically. And we didn't handle it like a bullying situation. We handled it like a conflict between two kids who Xander's power was with language and psychology, and Max's power was very much physical. And both of those powers had equal ability to hurt. And that's what we had to get to the kids is, no, it doesn't matter how you're using this, both of them have equal ability to hurt. And we'll kind of get, what we're going to do this afternoon is really get into defenses and how to defend. And that's where we'll kind of talk a little bit about what to do in this situation, that situation, because every situation is different. And so what you all want me to do is at 3:30 today, you want me to say, if you say this, it will stop bullying in its tracks and never happen again. I am not going to do that because that is never going to be the case. Every situation is different, so you have to handle every situation differently. But I'll give you the keys to how to intervene effectively. And if you follow those keys, you usually get it right. And if you don't get it right, you have the tools to try again until you get it right. And if you keep trying, eventually you'll get there. Okay? So, bullying, yes, please.
Before we move on, I just wanted to go back to what you said about the legislature. And it kind of ties in with what Liz was saying. Who's the one to, is rather subjective.
Right.
What is it that this law is supposed to accomplish? And are there repercussions? Is it...
Yeah, the new law is fabulous because the new law that they're trying to put into place basically says we are going to strongly encourage every school in the state to do a climate survey to find out what the state of bullying is in their school. And if you feel like you don't have the resources, we are going to develop a pot of private funds, not taxpayer dollars, that are going to be used for granting purposes. So if you feel like I don't have the money to do a survey, but I think I might have a cultural issue, or if you say I think our culture is perfect, but I'd like to do a survey anyway, you apply for a grant of, again, private funds, not taxpayer dollars. You get a grant, you do a survey, and if you get a grant, you're required to do culture surveys no matter what. And then you can use some of that money to educate your staff, potentially through great partners like, Power Up. You can educate your staff and educate your kids on how to prevent bullying. So it's not in any way, shape, or form. If you have bullying in your school, you'll lose all funding, or we'll take your kids away, or whatever. It's just we're going to provide you with a resource within the state of Colorado that you can go to find out what's going on in your school and to potentially fix it if you find that you have problems.
Yeah. Do they attempt within the scope of the law to identify and define what bullying is, what kind of behaviors constitute bullying? Do they do any of that?
Yeah, they have a quick definition of what bullying is, and I don't remember what it is right now, but I can pull up the legislation. I love having internet. I can pull up the legislation for you to look at later.
You don't necessarily have to
Yeah.
specifics.
But they have a really nice, one-sentence definition, and of course it's probably like a 12-page law, because that really is what they do. But they have a really nice definition. When I read the definition of bullying, I was like, oh, we could use that. That's a good one, So it's a really nice definition of bullying that really gets into the, if somebody feels targeted, you need to deal with it, because it doesn't really matter what the circumstances are. If you have a child who feels like they're being abused at school, that child should have some attention, and you should get to the root of that problem. Because it could be that they are just feeling victimized all the time, but it could be that they are being victimized all the time, and that's why they're feeling that way. And you need to get to the heart of it and find out what's really going on. Because the reality is, I'm sorry, there's a whole lot more people out there that get bullied and don't report it. It's sort of like rape, molestation. There's a lot more people that it happens to that don't report it than that falsely report that it's happening to them. That's just the reality of the situation. Yeah.
I just kind of feel like when I think of bullying, we're not to that place where, in domestic violence, we always honor the victim. We recognize the victim, and we don't question what they're saying. Where I think bullying, we're still the social norms around it are they just being a victim, or is this real? Where in domestic violence or sexual assault, we never question. We're that happened to you. What are we gonna do? And so it's really interesting to me that we haven't gotten to that place where we're this happened. What are we gonna do about it?
Barbara Colaroso is a big parenting guru, and her ideas on parenting totally changed my relationship with my son for the better. She has 6 critical life messages that a child should hear every single day to be a strong, self-actualized kid. I believe in you, I trust you, I know you can handle it, you are listened to, you are valued, you are very important to me. The very first one is I believe you. So when a child comes and says, something horrible is happening to me, it really doesn't matter what that horrible thing is, your default position should be to believe them. You know, it really is. I mean, we live in an innocent until proven guilty society, and I totally respect that. But when someone is coming to you and saying, I am being hurt, your default position with a child should be to believe them until you have some reason not to believe them. And unfortunately, the way bullying works is we have this myth around bullying that really does not apply to girls who bully specifically. And that is that bullies have low self-esteem and that they are pariahs in the school and people don't like them. That is totally untrue. Frequently, girls who bully have a huge amount of power, not only with their peers, but also with adults. They frequently come from families that have a huge amount of power. When I went to a principal once and reported bullying, and I went in with the kid, and the kid's telling the principal and the school resource officer, and the principal brought in all of the girls all at once, who all said all the reasons why they bullied Julia, and basically what they said is, we are kicking the dog, we don't want to be friends with her, and she keeps hanging around with us. And the principal called me, or I called the principal to follow up, and he said, really, Julia's bringing this on herself. I talked to the girls, and nothing happened with that. But I found out later that those girls, their parents hold really strong positions of power within the city of Fort Collins. And the principal is less powerful than those families are. And so there are a lot of power dynamics at play in a school, and not all of them. We think the principal is the key person in the school, but have you seen people who are in charge of the PTA sometimes? I mean, they tell the principal what to do at times. There are people in power in cities that tell the principal what to do.